Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Jesse Kinyua. Welcome to today's episode. We are discussing urgency for good corporate governance, and this topic has been necessitated by many reports that has reported unethical cases, mostly in parastatals, in government, mostly in developing countries, and also in the private sector. And we may first and foremost want to ask ourselves, what do you mean by corporate governance? Corporate governance is the system by which organizations are directed and controlled. An organization is normally directed and it has to be controlled by the leaders. It is how the power of an organization is exercised in the stewardship of organization resources. An organization normally has members or shareholders or the public who are the key interest groups, and therefore the leaders have to steward the resources of this organization. According to Cadbury in 1992, corporate governance is the system by which corporations are directed, controlled, and are held to account. In developing countries, and in particular in Africa, Africa has been lagging behind in development, not necessarily because of lack of resources, but due to poor corporate governance. There has been this culture of corruption, lack of good ethics. You find that there is nepotism, and this ought to change. And we ought to inculcate a culture of patriotism, whereby we think of our nation first. So patriotism ought to be enhanced, and corporate governance would help us in setting the values of the company or the parastatals, the government ministry, and it is to be distinguished from the day-to-day operation management of an organization by full-time executives. And therefore, there is this urgency for good corporate governance. There has been, for instance, increased cases of creative accounting and lack of disclosure, both in the private and in government parastatals or in government ministries, in developing countries especially. And in these developing economies, there have been many reported cases of misappropriation of funds. So funds that are meant to go into projects that would benefit the public, you'll find that they are being pocketed by a few individuals. I can give examples of counties in countries like Kenya, whereby a lot of resources have been channeled, but if you look at the development, you find that there is no much to talk about. And hence the need for good corporate governance. The internal and external auditors have not helped either. They have not helped much in unearthing unethical practices. Why? Probably because they fear they have been threatened with sacking, or they have limited laws as auditors. And even where we have external auditor, you find that there are still cases whereby public resources are being misappropriated. There has been cases of doctoring of financial figures, and this has been linked, for instance, to CEO compensation. Some people want to, some managers want to divert resources to their private use. And this is the case even in NGOs, in private sector, and even in government ministries and parastatals. The management at times make decisions that are not driven by short-term outcomes, but they do make those decisions at the expense of long-term. So you may find that some decisions that are made are meant to show a good short-term outcome. But if you look at the long-term, that may not be the most ideal decision for that organization. And therefore, there is an urgency for good corporate governance, especially in developing countries and in some Asian countries. The repercussion of this has been corporate failure due to scandals. So there have been reported haste, there have been reported scandals. Example of this has been, for instance, the Asian financial crisis that was reported some years back, money laundering that is still continuing, and reported cases of corruption and abuse of office by corporate leaders, and also shareholder activism. In developing economies, there have been many reports of unethical practices and lack of integrity, both in the management board and among managers as well. Good corporate governance enhances the corporate image. If we are to ensure that we have good corporate governance, we would enhance the image of our organization. It will also help in prudent management of internal resources, and this can lead to higher performance in our organization and also development in our counties and in our nations. Some multinational corporations also get contracts through corrupt practices. Take, for instance, the Asian nations. They do not focus so much on corrupt practices, and therefore you find that those multinational companies, when they come to look for contract, maybe in engineering, in construction of infrastructure, they will be engaged in corrupt practices. The quality of governance at all levels is increasingly being seen as the most important factor for the success of both the political economy and its institutions. Therefore, corporate governance is increasingly taking center stage with the privatization of economies globally, whereby even in Asian countries where we had we did not have capitalist government, you find that they are also changing and they are privatizing their government-owned institutions, and there is a greater expectation from society that corporate organizations, especially the private ones, should take a more leading role in the implementation of good corporate governance. It is therefore inevitable that the wider society, led by the mass media, would start questioning how organizations and governments are being run. And shareholders, the members, the owners of these organizations, especially in the public listed companies, they are also becoming increasingly vocal, demanding better transparency and disclosure of information from their directors. We also have regulatory bodies who are also demanding, who have also hinted that they would require good corporate governance practices amongst the publicly listed companies, and they have come up with their regulations. For instance, we have the CMA and Capital Market Authority and NSC in our case here in Kenya. And what would corporate governance, or what do corporate governance embrace? Good corporate governance embraces good public policy. Wherever we have good policies, you'll find that we are able to manage our institutions. We also have national values. We are supposed to embrace national values, whereby a nation should come up with core values that would help in ensuring that there is good corporate governance. It also embraces ethics and national priorities. There ought also to be consensus in budgeting and project implementation by the public. Whenever the government is coming up with a budget, they are supposed to consult the public. And whenever we are also implementing the projects, we are also supposed to consult the project that will be given more priorities. The self-regulatory mechanism by which the corporation governs and conducts itself to ensure that it remains legitimate, also remain viable and competitive, should be also enhanced. And therefore, corporate governance should enhance self-regulatory mechanism. The system by which the legitimacy, relevance, and compliance of corporation is monitored, supervised, and regulated through the national laws and statutes are also stipulated by good corporate governance. What are some of the values of good governance? One is accountability of power, based on the fundamental belief and power should be exercised to promote human well-being. So, good corporate governance embraces accountability of power. It also embraces, another pillar is democratic value. It embraces democratic value in respect to sharing of power, and also representation and participation of the shareholders and members of the organization. The sense of right and wrong, and what is fair, just, unjust, work ethics, technology, and corporate social responsibility are also key pillars. Another pillar is effective and efficient use of resources for the production of goods and services. So whenever we are allocating resources and whenever we are producing goods and services, we are the good corporate governance is, if it's well implemented, should enhance effectiveness and efficient use of those resources. We should also think about protection of human rights, whether it is of the employees, whether it is of the other stakeholders, like the community within which we are operating in. We should be mindful of those stakeholders, whereby we enhance the human rights and freedom of those stakeholders. We ought to have attitude towards the generation and accumulation of wealth through hard work and personal effort. At times, human resources don't want to work hard. They want to accumulate wealth in unethical practices, and that is also true in government parastatals and ministry, whereby instead of ensuring that resources are well utilized for the benefit of the public, you find that they may want to pocket that money so that they can do private projects. That is what we are seeing. Even the money that may go to county government, to parastatals, some of them are diverted for selfish gain. Recognition of the government as the only entity to which the society gives authority to use coercive power to maintain public order and national security, and to reallocate society's resources to meet the public need. What are some of the principles of good corporate governance? One of these is the authority and duties of the shareholders or members. And members or shareholders of the corporation should jointly and severally protect, preserve, and actively exercise the supreme authority of the corporation in general meetings. So the members have a duty to protect their resources in the meetings, whereby they are supposed to make decisions that would enhance the performance of their entity. When it comes to leadership, every corporation should be headed by effective board that should exercise leadership, enterprise, also ensure that there is integrity in decision-making process, judgment in directing the corporation to achieve continuing prosperity. Appointment of the board. How do you appoint your board members? Appointment of the board of directors should be done through managed and effective process to ensure that there is a balanced mix of proficiency or proficient individuals, and it is made in such a way that those who are appointed can add value and bring independent judgment to bear the decision-making process. Issue to do with strategy and value are core in organization and corporate governance, and the board of directors should determine the purpose and value of the corporation. They should determine the strategy to achieve the purpose and implement its values to ensure that the corporation survives and thrives even in difficult times. Structure and organization. It is the board that should ensure that there is proper management structure and systems in place that will make the functioning of the organization to be ideal for that organization and context, and also to ensure that there is corporate integrity, that the reputation of the organization is at all time not compromised, and ensure that the organization is pursuing its responsibility. Corporate performance, viability and financial sustainability is another principle of good corporate governance, and the board should monitor and evaluate the implementation of strategies, the policies of the organization, and management performance criteria, and the plans of the corporation. At times you find some government parastatals, they may not have adequate policies, and you may ask yourself, why doesn't such a parastatal have maybe policies that are key in decision making? And you may find that at times it may be deliberate, so that the management do not follow the due procedure. Maybe the manager does not want, what they want to do their own things in the way they think is okay, and therefore they may want to avoid coming up with good policies. Besides, the board should constantly review the viability and financial sustainability of the enterprise, and must do so at least once every year. Another principle is that of corporate compliance. The board should ensure that the corporation complies with all relevant laws, regulations, governance practices, accounting and auditing standards, and the failure to comply would lead to punitive repercussions. When an organization does not comply to some of these corporate requirements, like the regulations, you find that the repercussion could be punitive. At times, the organization may be taken to court because it failed to do things in the right way by any stakeholder who may be aggrieved, and the repercussion would be severe. Corporate communication is another key principle. The board should ensure that corporation communicate with all its stakeholders effectively. So communication is key, and there are four major functions of communication. That of motivation, whereby you speak to your stakeholders, like the human capital, to motivate them, to give them information, and to ensure that there is proper control. And also the emotive function, whereby you may want to give, you may want to be there for your stakeholders. So in conclusion, good corporate governance would lead to effective resource allocation. We would ensure that resources are allocated for the priority project, the project that have been evaluated, and they are seeing that they will benefit the majority of the stakeholders or the public. Also, good utilization of resources. We ensure that resources are well utilized, and it will also enhance development in all sectors, especially in developing countries, whereby this nation may be lagging behind. Good corporate governance would enhance allocation of those resources and ensure that there is development in all sectors. And therefore, it is the missing link that we in the developing economy, whereby if we are to ensure that we have good corporate governance, then these economies will do well, and the general public would benefit from the resources that have been allocated by their government and also the private sector. Thank you so much for listening. You can click the like button and also make a comment. And also remember to subscribe so that you'll be able to see our next episode. Thank you so much and God bless.